to a, let's admit it, Indiana's for real edition of the College Huddle. Do us a big favor if you haven't already. Make sure you like the video. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you to so many who subscribed this past week and yesterday. We appreciate each and every single one of you. And if you are an Indiana fan, welcome aboard. We'd love to have you a part of the College Huddle. The College Huddle is a community of independent podcasters from coast to coast. There's 86 of us, 86 different podcasts that are part of this community, including the Hoosier Huddle. So, Indiana, you are well represented as well. And of course, we invite you to take part in our discussion down in the comments section below. I try my very best to respond to all of you within the first 24 hours of a video dropping here at the College Huddle. All right, I'm going to admit something to you. I thought Illinois, and this is a direct quote of mine from my other podcast from this season when we were doing the Big Ten previews, I thought Illinois was going to be this season's what I was calling Indiana from last year. I am wrong. I am way wrong. In fact, Indiana from last year, this year, it's Indiana again, except they are even better this year than they were last year. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit here in this video is the fact that Curt Cignetti has built a roster again in Bloomington that might be even a little more impressive than the one he built last year. And which is a good thing because they've got some big time games on the road up ahead this year, do the Hoosiers, and they're going to need every ounce of what this coaching staff can pull out of this roster if they're going to make a college football playoff. Again, back-to-back seasons, which would just be an amazing feat to think in the first 2 years of the 14-team playoff, Indiana could be a team that goes back-to-back in those first 2 years in playoffs. If you had that on your bingo card, hopefully you won yourself quite a bit of money if you bet that because no one outside of Hoosier faithful saw that coming in the last 2 seasons. Nobody did. And here's the thing, and I don't think that this is a wild take at all based off of what we have seen so far this season. I'm not so sure Indiana's not the best team in the state of Indiana, including over Notre Dame, who knocked them out of the playoff last year. And in fact, wouldn't that be an interesting turn of events if both those teams somehow made the college football playoff, except this time instead of being in South Bend, it's down in Bloomington come December? Wouldn't that be a wild game to watch? I think that would be incredibly interesting. All right, I'm going to share my screen here with everybody, and let's talk about this game yesterday a little bit. 63-10. I mean, that is a beatdown of epic proportions. I mean, no one saw that score. Even the almighty Vegas, who said that this was a 6.5-point game in favor of Indiana, and a lot of us looked at that and went, man, that seems a little high for Indiana. What do they know that we don't know? Well, apparently they knew that Indiana was going to put a whooping on Illinois, but not to the tune of 53-point whooping. I mean, my gosh, Vegas, you got that one way wrong, man. 53-point win in a game that had a 6.5-point spread in a team that was number 9 Illinois, number 19 Indiana. That is not just an upset, kind of, even though it really wasn't an upset according to Vegas. But that score is an upset. That score is shocking. That is absolutely shocking. So it raises the question for all of us who love college football, and it's a question a lot of times we answer or we get answered or we ask anyways early on in the season, and that is, and we'll apply it to this game. Is Illinois not nearly as good as we thought they were? I think the answer to that question is yes. Is Indiana much better than we thought they were? I think the answer to that question is also yes. I think both answers to that question are yes. I think both things are true. I don't think Illinois is nearly as good as I thought they were, and I don't think Indiana. I think Indiana is much better than I anticipated them being. So again, hats off to Indiana. That is a wicked score. And all of a sudden, Illinois, who had college football playoff aspirations, although their schedule is not nearly as difficult as Indiana's is going to be for the remainder of this season, I think Illinois, after getting beat 63-10, unless they were to run the table the rest of the way, which would include a home win over the number one ranked Ohio State Buckeyes, they're not going. They're not going to college football playoff. I don't even care if you're 10-2. I think a 9-3 team who has three, let's call it better losses than Illinois' loss to Indiana and Ohio State, even if both those teams make it to the college football playoff, that score is going to keep you out of the college football playoff. You lost the CFP. You lost your invite to the CFP with that score. Indiana just essentially demasculated you and said you're not good enough to be one of the final 14 teams in college football. Sorry, you're not. That's what that did. So if Illinois fans don't get mad at me, you need to get mad at the fact that you guys gave up 63 points and only managed 10 in Bloomington, Indiana last night as to the reason why you're probably not going to go to a college football playoff, because that right there is going to keep you out. Even if you go 10-2, the only way you're able to make up for that is if you go 11-1 and you beat Ohio State, who at the time might be number one in the country. If you do that, now you're back in the conversation. But if you don't do that, that right there, sorry, you're done for. Now let's concentrate on Indiana for the rest of this video. And let's go to their stats overall here. So, but before we do that, take a quick look at the stats. Indiana, this game was 7-7 at one point. Indiana scores on a blocked punt return for a touchdown. And that's how they got on the board first. Then Illinois marched down the field in the very next possession. They hit a 59-yard pass from Luke Altmaier and to Colin Dixon, and it was 7-7. It was like, oh, here we go, right? Indiana responds with a touchdown of their own to go back up 14-7. And then, guys, the second quarter, the route was on. They ended up scoring 28 unanswered offensive touchdowns. So 4 offensive touchdowns, 28 offensive points unanswered before Illinois puts a field goal in from 46 yards right at halftime to make it 35-10. And then coming right out of halftime, Indiana scores again on a 40-yard run and goes up 42-10, and the ball game was over. Essentially, the game was done. Now, yes, Illinois defensively they had someone get tossed for targeting. They had a couple injuries that knocked out some of their key defensive players. I understand all of that, but that is not like an excuse to give up 63 points and then offensively to not score again after scoring on an offensive touchdown on your second offensive possession of the game. To not score a touchdown again the rest of the game is criminal for this offense. Look at the disparaging statistics from yesterday. Illinois 161 yards, Indiana 579 yards against an Illinois team that was boasting one of the better statistical defenses from a season ago going into this year. Look at rushing yards real fast. Illinois mustered 2 rushing yards. Now, they gave up a ton of sacks, but 2 rushing yards to Indiana's 312. And then yards per play, 3.6 for the Illini, 8 even for the Hoosiers, more than doubling per play yardage. What Illinois was getting is that of Indiana. Let's look at individual statistics here real fast, and we'll go to Indiana. Let's talk about Fernando Mendoza. 21 of 23 for 267 yards and 5 touchdowns. And this was a second consecutive game, I believe, maybe third, but I think it was second, where he has scored 5 touchdowns in a game, thrown for 5 touchdowns in a game. He is a Heisman candidate. Yes, it's true. Indiana Hoosier football has a Heisman candidate after 4 weeks of college football. That is undeniable at this point. He is one of those front runners for New York City, in my opinion. And if he's going to continue to put up stats like this, he might run away with this thing by the end of the season. Now, he's going to have two huge games, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. Two huge games to really prove himself when it comes to the Heisman. But those stats, the way he manages this offense, he is cool, calm, collective. He's in control of this thing. That is a massive get. And if you want to narrow it down and pinpoint why is Indiana better this year than they were last year, that right there is one of the main reasons why. Now, their offensive line is really good too, and their defensive line. They are really good in the trenches, and I think they stole one of the best players from Notre Dame in their center. Okay. The offensive line for Notre Dame has not looked good at all. And this guy who played for Notre Dame last year, but was going to be replaced or wasn't good enough to start this year, decides to go south in Indiana, winds up in Bloomington, Indiana, and is anchoring this offensive line. He is fantastic, and it could be an early nominee for the Remington. So keep your eye on that as well. But statistically, offensively here for Indiana, my gosh, dude. Kobe Martin, 12 carries for 107 yards and 2 scores. Kalon Black, 10 carries, 89 yards and a score. Like, and Roman Hemby, who's the big name here, the transfer, I believe, from Maryland, if I remember correctly, 14 carries, 65 yards. He's not even the in the top two there with this. They've got so much talent in that backfield. And then you would be remiss if you didn't mention Elijah Surratt, 9 receptions, 92 yards, 2 scores. Omar Cooper, 6 catches, 78 yards and a score as well. They've got weapons all over the place. And then defensively, Tyreek Tucker ended up with 2 sacks yesterday. Mario Landino. Sorry, I'm having trouble with his name. I even practiced before I hit the record. Also, 2 sacks yesterday. I was really impressed with him. He's got a great motor, really good. And then Isaiah Jones adds a sack. Elijah Hardy adds a sack. Kalen Wyatt adds a half a sack. Like these stats are just incredible for Indiana. This is a really, really good football team, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's talk about the rest of their schedule here. All right, so we all were like, okay, pump the brakes. They played really three nobodies, three G5s for their non-conference, and it was kind of like, yeah, they looked great doing it, but did you really play anybody? Let's see how you look against Illinois, and then they just do the same exact thing they did in their first 3 games. And so all of a sudden, that was a telltale sign on how good Indiana is. So looking forward and projecting a little bit where they go from here, right? Because that really is the bread and the butter. And in my opinion, the next 3 weeks are going to tell you what this team's going to do. And then they've got the big one in November that I will get to in a second. But next up is Iowa uh, this Saturday on the road in Kinnick. Iowa coming off a big win in which they had to fight tooth and nail Friday night in Piscataway, New Jersey to take down Rutgers, a pesky Rutgers team who was very game in that football game. And Iowa had to fight tooth and nail to win that football game, and they did. And now they get to come home, and they're welcoming in a Indiana team right now that is off a straight heater. If Indiana doesn't have a letdown here, and that's what the one thing I would be very cautious of, if I'm in around, and I don't think Kurt Signetti's going to be, tooting his horn or, boasting to anybody this week. Look at what we just did. Like he's going to keep these kids grounded, focus, because he knows you cannot go into Kinnick and lay an egg here after what you just did against Illinois. That would be the most Indiana thing to do if you're the old Indiana, but this is not the old Indiana. This is Kurt Signetti's Indiana, and this is a completely different program with completely different players who seem to not give a rip what Indiana was for the better part of 100 years before these last two seasons. And I think they're going to go into Iowa, and if they can put a beat down on the Hawkeyes that comes anywhere close to what they just did against Illinois on the road, my gosh, is this football team for real? Then they get a bye, and then the big one of the two big ones for Indiana. They have to go out to Eugene, Oregon, Autzen Stadium, take on the Ducks. Oregon more than likely will be either undefeated or one loss against Penn State. And this will be a massive game for both teams. For both teams. If Indiana can go into Autzen and they can knock off the Ducks, guys, they're a college football playoff team. I don't care what anybody says. In fact, they're competing to win the Big Ten at that point. They're not just a feel-good story anymore. They're not just a team that backed their way into the college football playoff and they shouldn't have been there. A la the argument from Alabama fans last year. No, 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 no. This team is for real if they can go in the Autzen and take on the Ducks. If they beat Illinois, which they did, Iowa, which I think they will, on the road, and then go to Eugene and take out the Ducks, my friends, are they the best team in the Big Ten next to Penn State and Ohio State? The answer to that question is 100% yes, they are, which means they're a college football playoff team. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. All right, then they got a couple games that I would consider some gimmies. They host Michigan State. They host UCLA, who's the worst team in the Big Ten. They go to Maryland. I think Maryland is fool's gold right now still. Then they go to Happy Valley to take on the Nittany Lions. And this is another big one, just like Eugene. Again, if they beat Iowa, all they've got to do is beat either Oregon or Penn State on the road, and they're probably going to go to the Big Ten championship game, more than likely, if they just can win one of those two games. And if they don't win either one of them, but they don't get blown out bad, then they're probably a college football playoff team anyway, at 10-2, more than likely. So that's where Indiana's at. And then, of course, they finish with a home game against a Wisconsin team that may or may not have a interim head coach by that point. And then they go to West Lafayette to take on Purdue. And Purdue defensively is not very good. They're going to score a ton of points against Purdue. They're going to probably put up 70 or more in that game. And who knows what they could be playing for at that point. Probably a berth to the college football playoff, maybe even a chance to go to Indy for the Big Ten championship game. That's where Indiana's at. Going into yesterday, I didn't think they had a chance to do that. Coming out of yesterday, I'm convinced they have a very real possibility to do that. And like they say in Vegas, all you need is some chips and a chair, man. Well, guess what? They're sitting at the table. They're sitting at the table, and so far, Coach Signetti, he knows when to hold them, and when to fold them, brother. He knows how to play this game. That is 100% legit. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Again, if this is your first time and you've stumbled on the College Huddle, please consider subscribing to the channel, being a part of our growing community here as we make our way through this journey of the 2025 college football season. Till next time, guys, enjoy your week. We'll be back with more content at your disposal. We try to do it at least every other day, sometimes every single day here at the College Huddle. And don't forget to go over to thecollegehuddle.com and check out those 86 podcasts from coast to coast. See you, everybody.